Forever used to sound like a promise whispered under blankets and pinky-locked hands. It felt safe, like a word that couldn't hurt you because it meant staying. But lately, forever feels like a question mark carved into my chest. Because forever is easy when it's innocent. Forever is complicated when your best friend looks at you like you're drifting away, even though you're standing right in front of her. I'm a lesbian. I've known that since I was 16, since the first time my heart didn't flutter for a boy the way everyone said it should, but instead leaned quietly toward girls with soft voices and kind eyes. My best friend says she's straight. She's always said she's straight. And yet every time I fall for a girl, something in her sharpens, like I've crossed an invisible line I never knew existed. My name is Lena Moore, and I'm the kind of person people describe as easy to miss. I like it that way. I draw for a living, tucked into the corners of coffee shops, sketching strangers who don't realize they're becoming art. I listen more than I talk. I remember tiny details like how someone stirs their drink when they're nervous or how their shoulders relax when they finally feel understood. I came out in high school and survived it the way most quiet girls do, by pretending it didn't hurt as much as it did. I thought that once I accepted myself, the hard part would be over. I didn't realize the real complication had been sitting next to me since kindergarten, braiding my hair during recess and promising we'd never grow apart. Her name is Chloe Bennett, and if I'm easy to miss, she's impossible to ignore. Chloe is laughter that fills a room before she does. Blonde hair that always looks perfect no matter how careless she claims to be. She was cheer captain, prom queen, homecoming royalty without even trying. Teachers adored her. Boys lined up like she was a prize. Girls either wanted to be her or hated her for existing. And somehow through all of that she chose me. We met when we were 5 because she decided I looked lonely and informed me very confidently that we were best friends now. She's been doing that ever since. Choosing me loudly, boldly, like I was something worth claiming. Growing up, Chloe was my shield. When kids whispered about me being weird or too quiet, she snapped back for me. When I came out and my house felt colder for a while, Chloe slept over every night until my mom stopped crying so much. She held my hand at the mall without caring who stared. She told people I was her person, her favorite human, her constant. Back then it never felt strange. It felt lucky. Straight girls can be affectionate. Straight girls can be protective. Straight girls can love their best friends fiercely. That's what I told myself every time she curled into my side during movies or got sulky when I canceled plans for someone else. The first time I noticed the pattern, I told myself I was overthinking. I was dating Maya then. Maya had dimples and a gentle laugh, the kind that felt like being invited into something warm. I was happy, and that happiness felt fragile, like it might shatter if I named it too loudly. Chloe didn't like Maya. Not openly. Not dramatically. She just found faults. Maya talked too much. Maya didn't get me. Maya felt temporary. Chloe would text during our dates, call during movies, show up with some emergency that somehow always needed my immediate attention. When Maya eventually broke up with me, saying she felt like she was competing with someone she could never win against, Chloe hugged me and whispered, "I never liked her anyway." I laughed then. I wish I hadn't. After Maya there were others. Different faces, same ending. Chloe always became more clingy the happier I was. She'd get quiet when I mentioned a girlfriend, then overly affectionate when that girlfriend wasn't around. She'd frame it like concern, like protection, like love that didn't cross any lines because after all she was straight. I told myself I was projecting, that I was reading queerness into places it didn't belong, that straight girls don't fall in love with their best friends. They don't get jealous. They don't look wounded when you talk about building a future with someone else. Last night everything shifted. We were sitting in her car, the familiar hum of the engine wrapping around us like it always had. I told her about Ivy, about how serious it felt, about how I thought this one might last. I expected teasing, support, maybe even a dramatic "I'll interrogate her" joke. Chloe went still. Too still. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She stared at the steering wheel like it had betrayed her. In that silence, something cracked open inside me, a realization I wasn't ready to name yet. That was the moment I understood that forever isn't just about staying. Sometimes forever is about what happens when someone realizes they might lose you. I met Ivy on a Tuesday afternoon that wasn't trying to be special. The sky was undecided, the cafe half full, the kind of day that slips past most people unnoticed. I was sketching by the window, lost in the comfortable hum of my own thoughts. when she sat across from me without asking. She smiled like she already knew I wouldn't mind. There was ink on her fingers, faint but stubborn, and when I teased her about it, she admitted she worked at a small publishing house and always forgot pens in her pockets. That detail lodged itself quietly in my chest. We talked for hours. About art, about growing up feeling slightly off-tempo with the world, about how adulthood felt like improvising without sheet music. When she laughed, it wasn't loud. It was sincere. And when she kissed me outside the cafe later, it didn't explode my universe. It settled into it. I remember thinking, this feels easy. That scared me more than anything. I told Chloe about Ivy the next morning because telling Chloe things was as natural as breathing. We were sprawled across her bed, surrounded by half-folded laundry and open makeup palettes. I tried to sound casual, like this wasn't something I was already holding carefully in my chest. Chloe listened, nodding along, smiling a half-second too late after my jokes. When I finished, she tilted her head and said, "She sounds intense." The word landed oddly. Not sharp enough to argue with, not soft enough to ignore. I laughed it off because that's what I always did. I told myself Chloe was just being Chloe. Proactive. Honest. Straight. Our first official date didn't even make it to dessert. Ivy had chosen a quiet Italian place with dim lighting and mismatched chairs. She reached across the table and traced circles on my wrist while we talked about everything and nothing. I felt seen in a way that made my shoulders loosen. Then my phone buzzed. Chloe's name lit up the screen like a flare. I ignored it at first. Then again. Then again. Finally, I answered because my chest had started tightening. He was crying. Something about her car. Or her ex. Or how everything felt wrong. I apologized to Ivy so many times I lost count. She smiled and told me it was okay, but her eyes didn't match her mouth. I left early. Chloe hugged me when I arrived, clinging like I'd almost disappeared. I didn't notice how my happiness had quietly been traded for guilt. The interruptions became routine. Calls during movies. Emergency, texts during dates. Chloe showing up unannounced with coffee and an excuse that didn't quite land. Ivy never accused me. That somehow hurt more. She just adjusted. Gave me space. Smiled a little less. I caught her watching Chloe once, her expression thoughtful, almost sad. I wanted to tell her it wasn't what it looked like. I didn't know how. I didn't know what it looked like anymore either. Chloe, meanwhile, began acting like the rules had changed without my permission. She held my hand longer than usual. Rested her head on my shoulder and didn't move when I shifted. She started calling me mine, in that joking not joking tone that leaves no room to object without sounding dramatic. When I mentioned Ivy, her mood dipped like a sudden storm cloud. When Ivy wasn't around, Chloe glowed. I told myself I was imagining the contrast. I told myself it meant nothing. Straight girls can be affectionate. Straight girls can get attached. Straight girls don't mean anything by it. One night, Ivy finally asked. We were lying on her couch, legs tangled, the TV murmuring something neither of us was watching. "Are you sure your best friend doesn't want to be more than that?" she said gently, like she was offering me an exit rather than a challenge. I laughed too loudly. Too quickly. I said no. Of course not. Chloe's straight. Ivy nodded, but doubt lingered between us like static. I hated that I couldn't kill it. Inside my head, a quieter voice had started whispering. Not accusing. Just observing. It noticed how Chloe's eyes darkened when Ivy laughed too hard at my jokes. How she always found reasons to need me when I was happiest. How she never dated anyone seriously herself. I pushed that voice down. I didn't want to rewrite my past. I didn't want to question a friendship that had held me together for most of my life. Some doors feel too heavy to open because you're afraid of what will spill out. By the time Ivy began pulling away, I was already exhausted. Torn between loyalty and longing. Between what had always been and what could be. Chloe didn't see it as a triangle. He saw it as a theft. I didn't see it clearly at all. I just knew something was wrong, and pretending otherwise was starting to cost me more than I was willing to admit. Chloe loved reminding people she was straight. Not defensively, not loudly, just casually, like it was a coat she shrugged on whenever the weather changed. "I'm straight, but," she'd say before launching into a story that somehow always ended with her arm around me. "I'm straight, but Lena's my exception," she once joked at a party, laughing as if that sentence meant nothing at all. Everyone laughed with her. I laughed too, even though something in my chest tightened every time she drew that invisible line, stepped over it, then pretended it was never there. Straight was the word she used to keep the world from asking questions. It was also the word she used to keep herself from answering any. The party that finally made the line impossible to ignore was loud and sweaty and crowded with people who smelled like cheap perfume and expensive confidence. Ivy was there, her hand tucked into mine, her thumb brushing my knuckles in that absent-minded way that made me feel chosen. Chloe arrived late as she always did, sweeping into the room like she owned it. The moment she spotted us, her smile flickered. She hugged Ivy with the enthusiasm of someone greeting a distant coworker, then looped her arm around my waist like it was muscle memory. "There you are," she said into my ear, warm breath sending a shiver down my spine. "I was looking for you." I gently stepped away. Chloe noticed. She always noticed. As the night went on, Chloe barely left my side. She laughed louder at my jokes than anyone else. She leaned in too close. When Ivy went to grab drinks, Chloe tilted her head and said, "You don't really need her here, do you?" The words were light, playful, but her eyes weren't joking. I pulled back, heat rushing to my face. "Chloe," I warned softly. She rolled her eyes and smirked. "Relax. I'm straight. You know that." The sentence felt like a slap wrapped in silk. After that night, I started creating space. Not dramatically. Just quietly. I answered texts slower. I said no more often. I chose Ivy. The shift was subtle, but Chloe felt it immediately. He always did. She accused Ivy of changing me, of pulling me away, of turning me into someone she didn't recognize. "You used to tell me everything," she said one afternoon, arms crossed, voice trembling despite her effort to sound annoyed. "Now I feel like I have to schedule time with you." I wanted to say that adults do that sometimes. That love expands, it doesn't replace. But the way she looked at me made the words stick in my throat. Chloe started framing her jealousy as concern. Ivy wasn't good for me. Ivy was temporary. Ivy didn't understand me the way Chloe did. Every sentence came wrapped in care, but underneath it was something raw and possessive. When I pointed out that Chloe never seemed to have time for her own relationships, she shrugged. "I'm just picky," she said. "Guys never really do it for me." She laughed after, like she'd accidentally said something too honest and needed to bury it quickly. My mind snagged on that sentence and refused to let go. One night, after I canceled plans with Chloe to go on a weekend trip with Ivy, Chloe showed up at my apartment unannounced. She sat on my bed, arms wrapped around herself, eyes shiny. "You're my best friend," she said quietly. "You're not supposed to leave." The word leave echoed inside me, heavy and unfair. I wasn't leaving. I was growing. But how do you explain that to someone who sees growth as abandonment? I sat beside her, close but not touching, feeling like I was standing on the edge of something fragile. Inside my head, the internal monologue I'd been avoiding finally spoke up clearly. This isn't normal. Not for straight friendship. Not for healthy love. I replayed moments I'd brushed off for years. The way Chloe's hand lingered on my thigh. The way she never dated seriously. The way she softened only with me. Realizations stacked themselves quietly, like books returning to a shelf I hadn't noticed was empty. I didn't want to label her. I didn't want to force a truth she wasn't ready for. But I couldn't keep lying to myself either. The distance between us grew heavier after that. Chloe oscillated between cold and clingy, sarcasm and sadness. Ivy felt it too. She became quieter, cautious, like someone bracing for impact. I felt torn in a way that left me exhausted. Loving Ivy felt right. Loving Chloe felt inevitable. The straight girl line Chloe kept drawing was starting to blur, and I was terrified of what would happen when it finally disappeared. Because some lines, once crossed, change everything forever. The night Chloe broke open didn't arrive with drama or warning music. It crept in quietly, disguised as rain. I remember because the sound of it tapping against my windows felt like a countdown I didn't understand yet. I had just come home from Ivy's place, heart heavy with things unsaid, shoes still on when my phone buzzed. Chloe's name flashed once, then again. Before I could answer, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, she was standing there soaked, mascara smudged, hair plastered to her cheeks like she'd been crying long before the rain started. She didn't say hello. She just stepped inside as if my apartment had always been hers too. She sat on my couch like gravity had finally won. No jokes. No teasing. No performance. Just silence and the sound of her breathing coming apart in uneven pieces. I hovered for a moment, unsure of the rules anymore. then sat beside her, leaving a careful inch between us. I told myself I was being kind. I told myself I was being cautious. Inside, my thoughts were racing, flipping through every version of this night I'd imagined and realizing none of them had prepared me for how small she suddenly looked. Chloe had always been loud, certain, unbreakable. Seeing her like this felt like discovering a crack in a statue you'd believed was solid stone. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, staring at her hands. Her voice sounded unfamiliar, stripped of confidence. I asked what she meant, but the question felt pointless. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. "Watching you fall in love with other people," she said. "Pretending I'm fine." Her shoulders shook, and suddenly she was crying in a way I'd never seen before, like something inside her had been holding its breath for years and finally gave up. I reached out without thinking, resting my hand on her back. The contact felt dangerous and necessary all at once. The words spilled out of her like she'd been rehearsing them in secret. How every girlfriend felt like a countdown to losing me. How calling herself straight was easier than admitting what she felt, even to herself. How she told herself she just wanted me happy, until happiness didn't include her. "I don't want you to belong to anyone else," she said finally, voice breaking completely. "I don't care what that makes me. I just can't stand the idea of you choosing someone and leaving me behind." The room felt too quiet after that. The rain outside filled the silence like static. Inside my head, everything froze. Years rearranged themselves in an instant. Every moment I'd questioned, dismissed, laughed off suddenly snapped into focus. I felt relief and fear crash into each other, leaving me dizzy. Part of me wanted to reach for her, to ease the pain I'd unknowingly been part of. Another part wanted to stand up, to put distance between us before this truth rewrote everything I thought I knew. I sat there, heart pounding, thinking about Ivy. Thinking about how honesty sometimes arrives too late to avoid collateral damage. "I don't know what to say," I admitted quietly. Chloe nodded, tears sliding down her face. "I know," she said. "I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. I couldn't keep pretending." That sentence hit me harder than the confession itself. Pretending. We'd both been doing it. Me pretending Chloe's behavior was normal. Her pretending her feelings weren't real. We'd built an entire friendship on things left unsaid, and now it was collapsing under the weight of truth. I didn't kiss her. That fact mattered to me even in the fog of emotion. I didn't pull away either. I stayed. I listened as she talked about how long she'd been confused, how she tried dating boys and felt nothing, how loving me felt inevitable and impossible at the same time. I felt my own chest ache in response, not with romantic certainty, but with empathy so deep it scared me. Loving someone doesn't always mean you're ready to love them the right way. When she finally fell quiet, exhaustion settling in, I helped her dry off and handed her one of my hoodies. It smelled like me. She noticed. Her expression softened in a way that felt intimate without being romantic. "I'm sorry," she said, "for making things complicated." I wanted to tell her that life does that on its own. That feelings don't ask permission. Instead, I just nodded and told her to rest. She fell asleep on my couch, still sniffling like a storm that had finally burned itself out. That night, lying awake in my bed, I stared at the ceiling and let the truth settle into my bones. Chloe loved me. Not in the way I'd always assumed, not safely contained within the words straight. And now that I knew there was no going back. The question wasn't whether this would change everything. It already had. The real question was whether we could survive the truth without losing each other entirely. Chapter 5. Choosing Honesty. The morning after Chloe's confession felt unnaturally quiet, like the world had agreed to tiptoe around me while I figured out what I'd broken. Sunlight crept through my blinds, dust floating lazily in its path, indifferent to the emotional earthquake of the night before. Chloe was still asleep on my couch, curled into herself, my hoodie pulled up to her chin like armor. I watched her for a moment longer than I should have, my chest tight with conflicting feelings. Affection. Guilt. Fear. A tenderness that didn't know where it belonged. Inside my head, one thought repeated itself steadily, refusing to be ignored. Pretending now would be cruelty. I didn't wake her. Instead, I made coffee and stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Ivy's name sat there, unread messages stacked beneath it. She deserved clarity. She deserved someone who wasn't emotionally split in half. I kept replaying her gentle patience, The way she never demanded more than I could give, the way she stepped back instead of pulling harder. That realization hurt the most. Loving Ivy hadn't been dramatic or painful. It had been calm. And somehow that calm had been disrupted by a truth I hadn't asked for but couldn't unlearn. I knew what I had to do, and knowing didn't make it easier. Breaking up with Ivy felt like slowly lowering something fragile onto concrete and hoping it wouldn't shatter. We met at the same cafe where we'd first talked, the symmetry almost cruel. She listened quietly as I spoke, hands wrapped around her mug, eyes never leaving mine. I told her I wasn't fully present. That my heart was tangled in places I needed to face alone. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she exhaled slowly and nodded. I felt it, she admitted softly. I just hoped it wasn't true. Her honesty made my throat burn. She hugged me goodbye, firm and brief, like she was protecting us both. I cried in my car afterward, grief and relief tangled together in a way that felt undeserved. Chloe woke up to an apartment that smelled like coffee and goodbye. She looked at me with cautious eyes, searching my face for answers I hadn't offered yet. I told her about Ivy. About the breakup. Her immediate reaction was guilt, sharp and sincere. I never wanted to hurt you, she said quickly. Or her. I believed her. That was the problem. Good intentions don't undo impact. I told Chloe that what she'd confessed mattered, but it didn't give either of us permission to rush into something undefined. Her shoulders sagged, relief and disappointment colliding. So what now? She asked. The question echoed in my chest. We decided on honesty. Radical, uncomfortable honesty. No more blurred lines. No more clinging. No pretending nothing had changed. We talked for hours that day, sitting on opposite ends of the couch like emotional negotiators. Chloe admitted she didn't even know what she wanted to call herself yet. She'd spent so long hiding behind straightness that the idea of questioning it felt like learning a new language without a dictionary. I listened, trying not to project my own hopes onto her uncertainty. Inside, I kept reminding myself that love without clarity can still be selfish. The days that followed were strange and tender. Chloe didn't text constantly anymore. When she did, it was thoughtful, measured. She asked before hugging me. She respected space in a way she never had before, and somehow that restraint felt more intimate than all her previous closeness. I noticed myself missing her even when she was doing everything right. That scared me. I wasn't ready to define that feeling. I wasn't ready to name it love or dismiss it as habit. I let it exist without interrogation, like a bruise you don't press. We went for walks instead of dates. Talked about childhood memories, about how much we'd both changed, about how terrifying it was to realize that the future didn't look the way we'd always assumed it would. Chloe admitted she was afraid that without the safety of friendship she might lose me entirely. I admitted I was afraid of choosing comfort over truth. Saying it out loud loosened something in my chest. We weren't fighting for possession anymore. We were negotiating honesty. One evening, sitting on the hood of her car under a sky smeared with pink and orange, Chloe said quietly, "I don't want to rush you or trap you. I just want to be real." The simplicity of that statement hit me harder than any confession. For the first time, she wasn't trying to secure me. She was offering herself without guarantees. I realized then that whatever this was becoming, it was different from before. Healthier. Fragile but honest. Choosing honesty didn't fix everything. It didn't magically untangle my feelings or erase the pain left behind. But it stopped the bleeding. It gave us a foundation that wasn't built on fear or denial. And for the first time since forever stopped feeling safe, I felt something steadier take its place. Not certainty. Not romance. Just the quiet relief of knowing that whatever came next, it would be real. Dating Chloe didn't begin with fireworks or declarations. It began with a question. We were sitting across from each other at a diner we'd known since we were 12, final booths cracked with age, menus sticky with syrup ghosts. She stirred her coffee without drinking it and asked, "Can we try something slow?" The word try mattered. Slow mattered more. I nodded, surprised by how calm I felt saying yes. Inside, a cautious hope lifted its head, wary but curious. This wasn't the love story we'd rehearsed in secret over the years. This was a new language, and we were learning the alphabet one careful letter at a time. Our first date was embarrassingly ordinary. A walk through the park. Ice cream melting too fast. Chloe wore jeans instead of the dresses she used to armor herself with. She asked questions and waited for the answers. When she reached for my hand, she paused first, giving me space to choose. That pause rearranged something in my chest. I realized how rarely she'd done that before. The old Chloe would have grabbed, joked, claimed. This Chloe offered. I took her hand, and the contact felt like recognition rather than conquest. So it wasn't easy. Familiarity can be a shortcut and a trap. We knew each other's tells, the stories we repeated when nervous, the arguments we avoided. Sometimes we slipped. She'd get jealous of nothing, a waitress smiling too warmly, a stranger laughing at my joke. I'd retreat into myself, afraid that choosing her meant erasing the parts of me that had learned to survive independently. When it happened, we stopped. We named it. That felt old, she'd say. I would. Naming became our lifeline. Kept the past from driving the present. We relearned boundaries like children relearn balance after a growth spurt. She stopped showing up unannounced. I stopped assuming her emotions were my responsibility to manage. We talked about attraction, about how confusing it felt for her to realize desire didn't arrive with a checklist or a rulebook. She confessed she was scared of labels, scared of disappointing people who'd always expected her to fit neatly somewhere. I told her that fear didn't make her weak. It made her human. Saying it out loud felt like forgiving a younger version of both of us. There were moments of unexpected joy. We cooked dinner together and burned the garlic, laughing until our stomachs hurt. She watched me draw and asked questions that proved she was seeing me, not just standing near me. I watched her learn how to be quiet without disappearing, how to sit with discomfort without turning it into a joke. Falling in love this way felt less like tumbling and more like building, piece by piece, something that could actually hold weight. One night, curled on my couch with the lights off, Chloe admitted she'd started therapy. She said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal, but her hands shook. I want to be good at this, she said. Not just with you. With myself. The honesty of that moment wrapped around me like a blanket. Love, I realized, doesn't always announce itself with passion. Sometimes it shows up with effort. Sometimes it sounds like accountability. I checked in with myself constantly, an internal compass recalibrating with every step. Was I choosing her out of comfort? Out of history? Or because, when I pictured the future now, she was there not as an assumption but as a choice I kept making? The answer surprised me. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. Being with Chloe didn't shrink my world anymore. It widened it, inviting questions instead of shutting them down. We kissed differently too. Less urgency, more attention. She learned the language of my pauses. I learned the rhythm of her breath when she was nervous. Intimacy stopped being performative and became conversational. There were nights we talked instead of touching, and that felt just as close. I thought about Ivy sometimes, about the clean ending we never got. The thought no longer stabbed. It reminded me why clarity mattered, why I refused to lie my way into happiness again. By the time I admitted to myself that I was falling for Chloe, it didn't feel like betrayal or inevitability. It felt earned. Different from the love we'd imagined growing up, better suited to who we were now. Learning to fall differently meant letting go of the script and trusting the work. And for the first time, that work felt like something I wanted to keep doing, not because of forever but because of now. We never sat down and declared ourselves anything official, and somehow that felt perfect. No announcement. No dramatic unveiling. Just a quiet understanding that settled in over time, like sunlight slowly warming a room. Chloe started introducing me differently, not as her best friend with the familiar possessive edge, but simply as Lena, said with intention. I noticed it the first time she did it, the way she glanced at me afterward, searching my face for confirmation that this version of us was okay. I smiled, small but certain. Inside, something unclenched. Love didn't need a megaphone. It needed room to breathe. Our days became a collection of ordinary miracles. Grocery shopping arguments over cereal brands. Long drives with the windows down, music too loud, our laughter dissolving into the open air. We still talked about the past, but it no longer felt like a place we were trapped inside. It was context, not destiny. Chloe still said she was figuring herself out, and I learned not to rush that process. Watching her explore her identity felt like witnessing a sunrise that refused to be hurried. Some days she was confident. Other days she was unsure. I stayed. Not out of obligation, but because staying felt like a choice I made gladly. Sometimes I caught myself bracing for old patterns. For jealousy. For fear. For the need to be everything to each other. When that instinct surfaced, I named it quietly inside my head and let it pass. Growth, I realized, doesn't mean you never feel the old feelings again. It means you don't let them drive. Chloe noticed those moments too. She'd squeeze my hand and say, "We're okay," not as reassurance but as acknowledgement. And we were. Not perfect, but honest. One afternoon we ran into Ivy at a farmer's market. The moment felt surreal, like the universe checking in on my character development. Ivy smiled politely, asked how I was. I answered truthfully. She looked at Chloe, then back at me, and nodded like something finally made sense. There was no resentment in her eyes. Just closure. Afterward, Chloe asked if I was okay. I realized I was more than okay. I was grateful. For endings that didn't rot. For lessons that didn't harden me. As the months passed, the word forever lost its sharp edges. Stopped feeling like a demand or a threat. It became optional, flexible, something that could be revisited instead of promised too early. Chloe once admitted she used to cling to me because she was terrified of being alone. "Now," she said, staring out at the city lights, "I still want you. I just don't need to cage you to keep you." The way she said it, steady and unafraid, felt like the truest love letter she'd ever written. Inside my own head, I took inventory of who I had become. I wasn't the quiet girl who let others define the shape of her relationships anymore. I wasn't afraid of walking away if something stopped being healthy. Loving Chloe didn't erase my independence. It honored it. I painted more. Slept better. Laughed without checking the room first. Love, when done right, doesn't shrink you into safety. It expands you into truth. We eventually talked about the future, not as a blueprint but as a shared curiosity. Maybe we'd move in together someday. Maybe we'd travel. Maybe things would change again. We didn't panic at the uncertainty. We trusted ourselves to navigate it. Chloe rested her head on my shoulder one night and said, "I don't need to own you to feel secure." I kissed her forehead and thought about how far we'd come from the girl who couldn't stand the idea of me belonging anywhere else. Forever doesn't scare me anymore. Not because I'm certain it will last, but because I know we won't lie to keep it alive. If this love continues, it will be because we choose it every day. And if it doesn't, it will end honestly, without resentment poisoning the memories. When Chloe looks at me now, there's no jealousy in her eyes. Just presence. Just choice. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough.